friends. You're tuning in right now to Reflections, a program sponsored by Paducah Cooperative Ministry, where together we do God's work with human hands. It's good to be back, Gregory. I'm Karen Winkel. I'm the pastor at United Church of Paducah, and with Gregory Waldrop, who's the pastor of Fountain Avenue United Methodist Church, we host this program and discuss all kinds of things that we hope are of interest to you. It's good to be back. I was away for a bit, and it's good to spend this time together with you, Gregory.
Very glad you're back and here, and we're glad you all are here with us as well. We got a special program today, a program about one of the special seasons in our Judeo-Christian faith program on Hanukkah, the celebration of Hanukkah. We have with us Bill Flarsheim, Florsheim from Temple Israel here in Paducah. He's on the board at Temple Israel and going to lead us through the celebration of Hanukkah and help us understand it. Glad you're here, Bill.
Glad to be here.
Tell us about yourself a little bit.
Well, I moved to Paducah about 1.5 years ago with my family. I'm with Mead West Vaco and have been with them really throughout my career to various locations. And I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, so it's nice to be back to the Bluegrass State.
Hey, well done. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're with us. And tell us about the celebration of Hanukkah.
The celebration of Hanukkah. Well, I wanted to begin the area that most people wonder about is Hanukkah's relationship with Christmas. Obviously both festivals of light, and we're celebrating the shortest day of the year and the return of the lengthening days. But relatively speaking, Hanukkah does not have the importance to Judaism that Christmas does to Christianity. And an analogy of where Hanukkah would fit, it's not perfect, would be to St. Patrick's Day in importance. It's certainly, as with St. Patrick's Day and the Irish, it's important to Jews and how Jews became what we are today, but theologically it is not as significant as Christmas is. The foundation holidays of Judaism are more Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the New Year and the Day of Atonement, that take place in the fall. But because of its proximity to Christmas and because of what Christmas has become in the United States, Hanukkah has gained much more importance. And for many people, it's the one Jewish holiday they can name and the one Jewish holiday they know about.
It's a great holiday. It's a holiday that I keep and enjoy and delight in. It is really a part of our Judeo-Christian heritage. It was our people as well. It was our people, all of us together, who had this amazing experience in the 2nd century BCE. And if you tell us about Hanukkah.
Okay, well, a little background, going way back, the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and Jews were scattered. Some were exiled to Babylonia, some fled to Egypt, and some stayed around Jerusalem in the area. And through the years, they collected back in around Jerusalem, but stayed scattered. And a second temple was built, but there was never a Jewish independent state. It was always subject initially to the Persians, and then Alexander the Great conquered most of the known world and brought the Greek influence to the area. And after that point, Jerusalem it's always been at a crossroads. It was variously under control of the Egyptian Empire or the Syrian Empire under various names. As we get to the time of Hanukkah in the 2nd century BCE, the Syrians controlled the area, several rulers named Antiochus, who figures in the story. And they're called Syrians, but sometimes it's also called the Greeks, because it really was Greek culture and the Hellenistic culture that had come through the area and was very popular. Greek culture brought a lot with it. People liked the gymnasium, they liked the sports, and many people, Jews included, were becoming assimilated. And in the area around Jerusalem, the province of the Syrian Empire, it was the Jews had mostly local control, were not independent. But there was a split between those Jews who were adopting the Greek culture and those who were preserving monotheism in the Jewish ways. And that became somewhat political too.
Sure.
And somewhere around 170, wrong century, the the Syrians were defeated by the Romans somewhere else and had to pay more booty, and so there were some increased taxes. And for reasons that may be political more than religious, the Syrian rulers tried to stop the practice of Judaism completely, brought idols into the temple, demanded the sacrifice of pigs in the temple, which of course unkosher, and basically we're working to wipe out these people who preserve Judaism against the common culture. And that was introduced for a couple of years, and it triggered a revolt led by Mattathias, who had 5 sons, of which Judah Maccabees the most famous. And they started a revolt against the Syrian rulers and also against the Jews who were Hellenized, who had basically assimilated. It began as something of a civil war, but expanded. And beginning in 167, and by 164 they'd recaptured Jerusalem and rededicated the temple in Jerusalem, cleaned it out, either purified the altar or built a new altar. And that's where we have the first Hanukkah, which means rededication. The battle actually continued after that. Yes?
Yeah, the story is captured in what a lot of people know as the intertestamental literature.
Yes.
First and Second Maccabees in some of the Bibles that are printed.
Right. It's not traditionally part of the Jewish Bible. There are Jewish Bibles that include it because it's an important story, but because the Jewish Bible had been codified, it was wrapped up and complete by then. It's not technically part of the Jewish Bible. It's a later story, as you say, between the Jewish Bible and the Christian Bible. And historically the fighting continued, and the Jews did create an independent Jewish kingdom, not under any outside rule, that lasted about 100 years and preserved the Jewish faith into future time. Right. And it's celebrated as it's the first time people fought for religious freedom in history and preserved their faith, whereas in ancient times empires would come and go and people would adopt the gods of the conqueror.
The winner,
but the Jews persevered.
Well, what about the 8 candles? Tell us how the menorah...
The menorah gets started. That's a story that really appears to have arisen later. It's not mentioned in Maccabees, but that when the temple was rededicated, part of the temple was the eternal light, the fire that was always burning, and it had to be fed with purified olive oil. And it takes 8 days to go through the necessary filtrations to make the olive oil. And when they rededicated the temple, they only found enough oil for 1 day. But they lit it anyway, and miracle that it lasted for 8 days. Now, being historically accurate, I have to say this story doesn't appear until couple hundred years after the fact. And the emphasis of Hanukkah has changed through time, whether you emphasize the Maccabees and the military heroics or the miracle of the oil. One theory behind this is by the time the Romans conquered Jerusalem and then there were the revolts and the Second Temple was destroyed, the idea of Jews practicing a holiday that celebrated the military defeat of an empire would not have gone down politically. And that's where historically you see the rise of the story of the oil and the miracle of the light. And that is the basis for a lot of our celebrations, and it's very important to the story. Since the founding of Israel in 1948, the heroics of the Maccabee and the military side of it has perhaps been re-emphasized some also, and it's a proud part of modern Israel's heritage too. Now, as part of the 8 days, this brings us to the Hanukkah menorahs that are used to celebrate. And I'll grab this one. This is the most traditional one. This is actually this is a 9-branched candelabra, and menorah is the Hebrew for candelabra. It's based on a 7-branched candelabra that was found in the temple in Jerusalem. It's described in Leviticus as part of the things to be made to go in the temple. And there's usually one found in most temples today, decorative art, used for light in the original temple, presumably. That 7-branch was adopted as a 9-branch to go with the 8 days of Hanukkah plus 1 helper candle or shamus. The way the menorah is set up, on the first night of Hanukkah, we put one candle plus the shamas, light the shamas, and then use it to light the next candle. And then through the 8 days, we add an additional candle each day until on the final night, everything is burning.
And you light the candles and let them burn all the way.
Let them burn all the way down. So I say this is a traditional one based on the design that's described in Exodus for a 7-branched candle, but they come in many other shapes and sizes. And here's one. The general flat design is fairly common, but it's more of a brightly colored one, children's menorah. In our family, we have at least one per person. Not everyone does, but it's fun, gives everyone a chance to light them. And then finally, this other one I have, and maybe if you could hold it, that's a representation of the houses of Jerusalem, or the buildings of Jerusalem.
Oh, marvelous.
But again, the flat layout with the shamas or helper candle in the middle, and sometimes the shamas candles off to one side. But it's always the highest or set apart. And shamas is just the word for someone who works in the temple, the person who keeps it up, otherwise in charge.
I'm trying to remember, but I'm thinking that Daniel, and particularly Daniel, from the originates or finds some power, particularly in this season of the church's life.
Yeah, I was reading in a history book last night, said that the book of Daniel was probably finalized at that about that time.
Right.
The story of Esther may also have arisen at this time as an inspirational story to see she did it. She preserved the Jewish people in their time of need, and we can do it also.
Right. And this was really sort of the earliest example of a guerrilla war, wasn't it? I mean, this was a family with...
It definitely started as a guerrilla war.
Yeah,
and to the point of rededicating the temple was certainly more a guerrilla war. Later, the kingdom that was founded, the Hasmonean kingdom, had some real military success. They also were pretty good politically. The Syrian Empire had some internal factions that they were able to play, and also play off against the Egyptian Empire of the time, which allowed them to keep their independence for the 100 years.
Right.
But it certainly began as a guerrilla war and a war for religious freedom. Now, moving to some other things that go with it, it's very much a family holiday, and one that's celebrated in the home for every night. Usually temples will have a dinner at one night during it, but for most of the time it's a family celebration. And some of the things that go with it, first there are foods associated with oil, and I've got a couple of them here, the two most common.
I wish everybody could smell it.
Yeah, it does smell good. I'm going to hold it up. In the front are potato pancakes, or latkes, which are just potatoes with some egg and onion and a few other things fried in oil, usually eaten with either sour cream or applesauce. Very good. And that's a part of the European tradition of Judaism, where potatoes were very common. The donuts is more from the Near East, Middle East, the fried dough, sugar-coated dough, and now often jelly donuts. I don't think jelly donuts were as traditional, but the idea of eating donuts as well as the potato pancakes is very common for Hanukkah. And they do smell good, and we'll probably break into them later.
Oh yeah, gotta have some of that.
Another thing that accompanies Hanukkah is the dreidel, and I have a few of them here, different sizes. It's a top, and the idea of playing with tops actually began as a subterfuge during the time that Judaism was being suppressed. When it was illegal to study the Torah, scholars would keep tops handy, and if soldiers came, they would hide the scrolls and start gambling with tops. Say, see, we're gambling, we're not studying. And so that was a subterfuge, and that was adapted to the holiday. And I've got different dreidels. This is one of my children made in religious school a few years ago, colored himself. But there are 4 letters on the scroll, and I don't know how well this is going to focus in. It may be a little small, but they are Nes, Gadol, Haya, Sham. which stands for a great miracle happened here. And so it's a remembrance of the battle. If you go to Israel, it will actually have a different letter. Here, instead of Sham, it's Pei, for a great miracle happened here.
Oh, here. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
But outside of the land of Israel, it's a great miracle happened there. And the game that is played with this, everyone starts with M&Ms or cookies or something and puts one in the middle, and then the first person spins. And depending on which side it lands on, if you get Gadol, you take the whole pot. If you get Hey, you get half the pot. Nun, you don't get anything, but you don't lose anything. And the Shin, you lose, you have to put something in to the pot, and it goes on to the next person. And everyone adds something else, and the pot gets bigger. So it's a fun little game, and usually good for a few rounds, and then people start eating the M&Ms.
That's great.
But it's a lot of fun. I guess the other thing that gets talked about a lot with Hanukkah is the gift giving. And this is where the parallel with American Christmas has probably been the biggest effect.
Obvious, yeah.
The tradition, there's always been a tradition of giving coins to children during the holiday. And that's actually carried on today. I wish I had some, but they're chocolate-covered coins you can get. See them around the holidays.
Right, they don't last very long either.
They don't last very, no, they don't last very long either. But with the rise of Judaism in America, as Americans were giving gifts on Christmas, American parents didn't want their children to be left out, and so gift giving with Hanukkah was added, and the tradition of giving one gift each night, which I know growing up many of my Christian friends were jealous because they thought, oh, you get one every night. Well, for every night they're not all big gifts, just a few big ones and some shirts and socks kind of thing.
Right.
Nowadays, it's probably more common to give our kids more significant gifts every night, but I know it's more common for Christian kids to get more than one present under the Christmas tree too.
Right.
So as I say, that's where the whole gift giving has expanded to coincide with Christmas.
Well, you're giving us a fascinating, really background of this. Again, I want to encourage our listeners to understand this and think of this as part of the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's such a wonderful part of the story and the faithfulness of God and of the really how people operate, how people of faith operate in the face of an arrogant nation or in the face of a domination or in persecution. And I hope people, if you don't know about the customs of this, will look into it and find it and follow it. It's a great way to celebrate our history and the faithfulness of God.
It is.
In all kinds of ways.
Exactly. One of the things that I'm thinking is that probably many people recognize the menorah. I remember just from television knowing what the Dreidel was and knowing there's a little song that goes with that. But one of the things that I know is that those of us who are Christians or people of other faiths don't know that much about Judaism in general. And I'm thinking, Christian people know when Christmas is because it falls on the same day every year. And folks may not be aware that there's a whole different calendar and that the Hanukkah, it doesn't fall on the same day every year.
It moves around with all the Jewish holidays. The Jewish calendar is a combination of a solar and a lunar calendar. The months are set by the phases of the moon, and they start with the appearance of the new moon in Jerusalem. And that begins the month, and the month is either 29 or 30 days because the lunar month is 29 and a half, so you have to come out even. But if you only did that, then the year would be 11 days shorter every year, and the holidays would just move backwards through the Christian calendar, which is what happens with the Muslim holidays. Ramadan is approximately 11 days earlier every year and goes through all the seasons of the year.
Right.
The Jewish calendar, though, is anchored to the seasons. Many of the holidays have seasonal significance, like Hanukkah, so that every 2 to 3 years an entire extra month is added in the springtime. It's the month is called Adar. It's the month with Purim and the story of Esther in it. And the story of that Purim moves with it. If there are 2 Adars, it's in the second Adar. And that keeps everything in the right season, but it still allows a leeway of plus or minus a month or so with holidays.
We understand that in the Christian faith as well, because we follow the at least in the Western Church, we date Christmas like Passover after the full moon, after the vernal equinox.
You mean Easter?
I mean Easter. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yes, thank you. Easter has the same kind of lunar
exactly, and that,
dating, which is interesting.
And that keeps it connected to Passover and the story of the Exodus,
exactly right.
which most years come at the same time.
Yes.
Passover occurs on the full moon. In that season, occasionally they'll be a month apart. If Easter is early, Passover will sometimes be late, which was the case in 2006, but that only happens about once or twice in 20 years.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's the same correction of a lunar cycle to fit the solar year that happens with Easter.
Yeah. The other thing that I know you had mentioned were the blessing of the candles, which Hebrew is such a beautiful language, and I'm wondering if you might share with us some of that.
I'd be
and tell
happy
us
to.
about those.
I'm not going to light them, but there are 3 blessings that go with Hanukkah. 2 that are said every night, and 1 that's only said the first night. And I'll explain each one of them a little bit after I say them. The first blessing, as you light the candles, is Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah. That blessing, blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with your commandments and commands us to kindle the lights of Hanukkah. That's a very common form of a blessing. It's the same blessing used to light the Shabbat candles or the festival candles. And the beginning is similar to the blessings for most everything, including blessings over food, wine, or many of the day-to-day tasks, which a more observant Jew than me would say it many times a day. I restrict it mostly to food and the candle blessings, and others when appropriate. The second blessing, which is specific to Hanukkah, is Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisim lavotenu, bayamim hahem. And that means, blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has this, excuse me, I'm getting confused, who did wondrous things for our ancestors at that time in this season. It's sort of the Hanukkah thing. Blessed are you for performing the miracles of Hanukkah. And finally, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. That's one that said the start of all the festivals and also was appropriate to any other important or joyous occasion. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has kept us in life, sustained us in health, and allowed us to reach this season.
And these are really ancient traditional prayers.
Yes,
These words have been said not for centuries, but for millennium. These would have been common even in certainly in the Seleucid, the Hasmonean days, but also in Jesus' day. I'm quite confident that Jesus and his bunch of disciples would have said these words as well and celebrated this in much the same way.
In much the same way.
Celebrated now.
And said the similar blessings for all the other holidays.
Right. Even I'm quite confident when Jesus and the Christian tradition says it says when he broke bread, he blessed it. I'm quite sure he started Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, the whole bit. I'm sure that was the words that
It
that
finishes
he offered.
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz,
Yeah,
who brings forth bread from the earth.
I'm quite
And then there's a
confident.
special one for the matzah too,
Yeah,
in the Passover story.
and so I think these words are worth our certainly celebrating and even learning. I know they've got them, how they call it?
Transliterated.
Yeah, so that people can get acquainted with them. And really the whole style of prayer is different than is often associated with prayer around here. We are saying a blessing, and in fact, we are blessing God. I mean, with those words, "Blessed are you, O Lord God, Creator of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth," or whatever it is. And I think it's a wonderful style of prayer, a different way of praying that is very instructive and important part of life.
Okay. And actually, what you mentioned transliteration, which makes me think of something else that becomes confusing around Hanukkah, and that's the spelling of Hanukkah. There's more than one correct way, and I'm going to pick this one up again. This Menorah spells it with the CH and one K, and the CH represents a Hebrew letter that Westerners have a hard time getting their mouth around. The pronunciation is Hanukkah,
Right.
with a kind of a guttural CH. It's not a CH like church, but it's not a soft H, though for Hanukkah, a soft H is perfectly acceptable and easier to say. So you see it with and without the C, and sometimes you see a double K, and even sometimes you put the H on the end, or sometimes you don't. That's part of how you represent the ah sound at the end.
Right.
But for everyone watching, don't worry too much about spelling, because you see it more than one way, and there's different ways it comes across.
That's great.
Well, I'm so aware that we could easily have another program just to continue this conversation, because something that we didn't get to that is on my mind is what it would be like to be celebrating Hanukkah as a member of a religious minority when the majority are celebrating Christmas. And I think that's maybe next year we can talk about
be
that,
fun.
because I'm getting a sense of the richness of this tradition that might feel a little set aside in a time when other things are happening. But I so appreciate all that you've shared today, and wonder if there's just one last little something that you might have to say.
What? Oh, that you're going to put me on the spot.
No,
And
okay,
what
all right.
I think we've covered
you've
an awful
just
lot,
been
and as you say, we could go off
marvelous.
on other things. And living in a dominant Christian society that has its moments, especially with little kids. Grown-ups, it works out okay, and it's a very tolerant community, and we've been very welcomed here. But yeah, that could be a whole nother show.
Yeah.
And I thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Bill, it's been marvelous. Thank you for coming and sharing the richness of your tradition, and a tradition that is for Christians a part of our heritage, perhaps largely unclaimed and uncelebrated. So thank you for your sharing and all the gifts that you've given today. We thank you, our viewers who've been with us this half hour. Reflections, this program sponsored by Paducah Cooperative Ministries. We look forward to having you join us again and participating with us in your way in doing God's work with human hands. Bye-bye.
Shalom.